The first thing that we want to think about when we show up to a lake is where do we want to put this bait in order to get it in the position to catch the fish the best. A lot of that depends on the time of year. Right now, it's spring. It's late April. These fish, we're on Lake of the Ozarks, these fish are on beds. Or if they're not on beds, they're getting ready to get up on beds. So they should be pushed shallow. This is a perfect time to get on the water and really kind of figure out where they're going to be at. They should tend to be a little bit more towards the back of the pockets. They should be on a little bit flatter stuff, any place that screams spawning area. Now in like the summertime, earlier in the pre-spawn or in the fall, it's all going to be a little bit different, but use your fishing intuition. Use what you've learned in the past from fishing. The fish ought to be on secondaries if it's pre-spawn, or if it's immediate post-spawn, or if it's really post-spawn and they're on main lake points, they're always gonna be in those locations. It's not like we're going out finding completely new fish. We're still targeting the fish that we always would target, but just with a bigger bait. The bait we're gonna be using today is the Clutch Eco. This is a great beginner swim bait. It's 95 bucks. In terms of resin high-end swim baits, it's on the more affordable end of the spectrum. Most of those baits out there under $40, $50 are plastic ones. And honestly, resin baits, you're gonna get the best bang for your buck. They swim really good. The fish seem to bite them better. They're more fun to work. A resin swim bait is gonna outperform a plastic swim bait a lot of the time. The watercolor here is kind of stained. This is the perfect barebone watercolor. So that's a Daiwa Tatula 100 on there, 17-pound fluoro. I'm not tying to a snap today. Tie whatever knot you have the most confidence in. This is the one I've used where you just kind of line it through, double it back in, cross it over, wrap 3 times down and back through the top, and it cinches down, and you got 3 tag ends when it gets cut off. So do that, cut those off, and we're ready to roll. Let's talk about angles. Angles in my mind is one of the most underrated aspects of swim bait fishing. Now, we're on Lake of the Ozarks right now. There's a million people out here. And if you watch, every single one of them is kind of working down the bank, working a dock the exact same way. Those fish are really accustomed to seeing that bait presented like, oh, it comes from right here. I'm sitting at a dock and that bait comes down this way every single time. Well, guess what? If you see a million baits, oh, there goes a square bill, there goes a spinnerbait, there goes a soft swim bait, coming the exact same way every time, they get conditioned that whatever comes from that way is fake. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a couple extra seconds, put my boat in a position to make a cast in a direction that they've never seen before. So if they're used to that bait coming this way, and they have something come completely the opposite way on them, they're going to be more apt to think that that's alive and go after it, especially if it's a bigger fish. Like, bigger fish are smart. Like that really popular spot on a lake that you're like, man, there's always a fish there, but like sometimes you catch one, sometimes you don't. Chances are there's a really big fish sitting on that spot. He's just so used to seeing baits come after him a certain way. If you present it from a different angle, it's a much higher chance that you're gonna fool that fish into biting. All right, let's show you a couple specific examples about how I'll position my boat in order to better optimize the angle of presentation that we're giving to these fish to try to get more bites than the average guy just going down the lake. Here's what I mean when we talk about going out of our way to put the boat in a position to really optimize for angles. The boat's against the bank, basically. And this is a main lake point dock, and there's a couple main spots that I'm gonna see as a potential high percentage spot for a good ambush point for a fish. So that point right there, we can slide some baits up underneath this stuff under here, but in terms of glide baits, we wanna go out of our way to put our bait in a position to make a cast on a piece of structure that fish don't typically see. It's like most people that fish this dock would be going down the outside, working their bait up against the bank to out. We came down this bank super tight, casting up against it, fish for those fish, and now we're kind of fishing for fish that wouldn't typically see a bait from this direction. That first cast is the cast I'm most concerned about when it comes to the angles, because I want that first cast to be from a cast that the fish have never seen it. Now, after we make that cast, we'll probably get up on the side a little bit and we'll start approaching it a little bit more traditionally, just really trying to dissect it and pick it apart. Especially when they're on them good, you don't want to leave a fish behind. So like right here, we're kind of tucked up next to the bank pretty good. You can hear those waves crashing. I think we're safe right in the middle. So we're gonna make a cast nice and crossed it. Try to keep it pretty high. Just bump it back and forth, nice and easy. I'm not sure how far it goes out into the water, so I'm gonna make a cast out front. Probably should have done that cast first, to be honest. But it's kind of nice and easy, work it back. Trying to show those fish something that they haven't seen before. And on the angle of this bluff, we're trying to get our boat as tight to the bluff as possible, trying to work our bait in the shallower part of the water, keeping it in the strike zone for as long as we can, put our bait for the longest amount of time in the optimal spot to get a bite. You can't really see the bait right now, but we're tucked up super tight to the bank. We're kind of casting out over that deeper water, bringing it up shallow. Most guys that come down this thing are gonna flip down the side of it, keep their boat really wide. And a really cool tip, we're putting those power poles just a little ways down. That actually just protects the motor. You're gonna bump the power poles before you bump your motor. All right, let's show you a couple examples on the water here about where we're going to target. This is a great example of a laydown, just kind of a bigger tree that kind of fell in the water. How we're gonna approach it with a glide, we're gonna be very cognizant of our angles. We're gonna kind of tuck up next to the bank, kind of work out, figure out where we think the fish should be stationed the most. It's kind of nice and easy, work it back. Trying to show those fish something that they haven't seen before. Riprap's a great fish holding structure. It's typically man-made. This isn't the best example of it, but you find it up next to marinas, bridges. It's that bigger, chunkier rock that's man-made or that's man-placed in a body of water. It just presents a good ambush spot for fish. So. This is a really good example of a rock transition. On the right, we've got some pea gravel, and on the left, we've got some bigger, chunkier rock. And just casting right up next to those transitions and just kind of working on it. It just gives a place that is a little bit higher percentage place that a fish can be. Now again, you want to make sure that the rock transition extends out into the lake. Like if those big rocks just stopped right on the edge of the water, it doesn't do us much good. Rock transitions are really important. This is a really good representation of a point that can typically hold some really good fish. We've kind of got the main channel going on out there. It's deeper water coming up to it, a little bit steeper, bigger, chunkier rock, presents a lot of ambush spots for those fish to come up and feed at. And we're just gonna kind of tuck our boat super tight to the bank, work down it. We're gonna give ourselves a really good angle to fish that dock, slide some baits up underneath the walkways here, and then kind of just keep working around the dock. Boat's super tight up against the bank, always paying attention to our angles. Trying to fish the bait deep to shallow as much as possible and create a surface that those fish can trap the bait against. This is a great example of a bluff end. The main channel butts right up against this big rocky point and it's just super, super sheer just drop. Contrary to what a lot of people think, fish will spawn on bluffs. They'll find a little ledge there and just kind of pull up there and spawn. But this isn't necessarily the best time to be fishing bluffs. I just kind of wanted to give you guys a demonstration of what it looks like when fish are on bluffs, how I'd fish it. I'd tuck the boat up tight to the bank, really worry about my angles, and kind of make this bait just look alive in the water and just kind of give it some twitches, some pops, and just make it look alive as it works its way back to the boat. So let's go on to the next structure. So a huge thing when patterning fish is a lot of times they'll get on secondary points. When they're on their way back to spawn, when they're on their way back out to summer locations, they'll stage on secondary points. What do we mean by secondary points? So this is the main lake out here. This would be primary points. Secondary points would be these little points in the backs of these pockets. So targeting these, they're just little stop signs that can hold fish. And it's a great thing to run. There's a ton of fish that get on them, and a lot of times here you can just run secondary points and just catch them. Let's get into how we're going to actually retrieve the baits. So we've got our spot figured out, we've got the time of year figured out, we've got the right time of day. Let's figure out how we're actually going to cast this bait out there and retrieve it back to us. And the big thing with this is you've got to find your own rhythm. Everyone that I've fished swim baits with they've got their own individual cadence that works really well for them. I've got one that works really well for me. My buddy's got one that works better for him, and it could be completely different. So you've got to really experiment with those different retrieves and find out what works best for you. When I show up to a lake, I don't know the activity level of the fish. They may be in a slow wind mindset. They may want something quick and choppy. So I will tailor my retrieve to kind of sample a little bit of all of that in the retrieve. And plus, it makes the bait look alive in the water. It doesn't look like a robot just kind of going back and forth in the water. You want it to look alive, you want it to look natural, and you want to be able to make that fish think that, hey, that's something that's alive swimming through the water that I gotta get, especially as there gets to be more and more pressure on these bodies of water. Look, there's a lot of people throwing swim baits now. We've got to stand out and be different. If they're gonna go up there and just make it just do this nonstop the entire way back to the boat, guess what? Like, that fish has seen that a million times. Make it a little bit smoother, make it look a little bit different, throw a little bit of your own special flair into it, and you're gonna have a lot more success because it's gonna look more alive in the water. In the spring, I tend to try to slow down my retrieves just a little bit. I'll try to make it a little bit smoother, a little bit more fluid. Seems like right up until they get on the beds, they do kind of like that little bit slower action, where once they get to post spawn, they seem to like a lot more speed. You can really trigger them with that speed element of the retrieve and catch a lot more fish that way. So keep that in mind when you're kind of experimenting with these retrieves. When you're in pre-spawn, slow it down a little bit. And when you're post-spawn, speed it up a little bit. All right, let's get up on the trolling motor and I'll give you a specific example on how to do each one of these retrieves. First retrieve is a slow, steady wind. This is probably best in early in the year when they're not super excited. It's just a nice, slow, steady wind, and that thing's just slaloming back and forth in the water, real nice and easy. On a really nice and long cast, that thing's gonna be a nice wide glide. On a slow, steady retrieve, you can see it gets a lot wider and it dances a lot more. That's the action you want. The thing about the boss and the baby boss, so this is a baby boss, on that slow, steady retrieve, it's gonna do it really well. You're gonna catch a lot of fish that way, but you notice it doesn't look like a robot in the water. It's very like, every little turn is just a little bit different, and that really triggers those fish to bite. All right, the second retrieve we're gonna talk about is the bump. This is another one kind of earlier in the year. It works really well. This, like, when you kind of know where the fish are at, it's really good. So you just kind of bump, bump, bump. You're trying to get that bait really wide. Using the rod a little bit there too. Reel handle and a little bit of bump. Let it sit, bump it, let it sit for a second, bump it. And it's just that nice and slow, steady, just bump back and forth, back and forth. And the third kind of retrieve we're gonna talk about is the chop. There's a couple different ways to chop. This is where it really starts getting fun. I use the reel handle a lot. I don't really use the rod tip much, but I'm just basically half turn, and just all the way back to the boat. What it looks like in the water with just the reel handle turns is that. This is where the baby boss and the boss really shine. Eco, I was chopping it all day long. Just doing a little bit of everything. So I'll cast it out there. I'll work it with the reel. I'll throw a couple rod twitches in there with it. I'll wind it nice and slow, nice and even, and then just give it a little something. Something so that if there's a fish following, that fish is intrigued by it and wants to bite it. It's not getting caught up in just the methodical, like, oh, what's that just kind of going down the lake? It's like, it looks like something that that fish wants to get at. And that cadence is something that you got to experiment with yourself, because everyone's different. Like, I like giving it a couple little boom boom and then let it kind of kick out. Everyone kind of works a little bit different, and you just got to experiment with it and figure out what works best for you. Finally, let's talk about fighting fish. So we've made the right cast, we've retrieved it right, we got a fish to bite the bait. Let's talk about fighting this fish back to the boat. So these baits are heavy. Like, spinner baits usually don't weigh 2, 3, 4 ounces. Like square bills are light, like jigs are lighter. Like, we're talking about some serious meat here. And all that weight turns into leverage when that fish comes up, tail walks, he's shaking his head. It makes it really easy for them to throw this bait. So the best way to fight a fish is don't fight it. Be a bully, get that fish back to the boat. That's why we have the setups that we have. We've got the setups so that we can bully that fish back to the boat. We're not gonna get punked out by an 8-9 pounder. We got a 300 size reel and we're just crank, 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 crank. And then if your buddy's not there with a net, I like to boat flip. I probably boat flip a little bit more ambitiously than I should. But if it's a really big one and you're not wanting to boat flip, you've got to make sure to keep taking them the same way. You never want to double them back. You don't want to let them surge. You just want to keep that fish going one direction, keep that rod boat up, keep that tension super tight, be a bully, crank, 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 keep that tension on them and land the fish the best way you can. So fighting fish it takes a lot of time to be able to get good at it because you will lose a lot of fish. I've lost a ton of fish in the past. I've made a ton of mistakes. I still make a bunch of mistakes while fighting them. It's really easy to lose them on it, but if you keep tension, keep pulling, don't let the fish fight, be a bully, you're gonna land a lot more fish than if you were just like, oh, I'm just gonna let them play out. It doesn't work out that well. And we've got 2 previous videos up on the site for anyone that's either skeptical and trying to figure out why swim baits work or what your setup should be when you're first getting into swim bait fishing. So check those out, they're linked down below. Those videos are just to kind of give you the best idea about what to use for a setup to start throwing swim baits so you don't have to go out there, waste a bunch of money on a bunch of stuff you don't need. It's the bare bone essentials that you need to start getting confidence throwing swim baits.